I'm gonna do another solo recording here because I did a recording previously and I messed up because I forgot to save or fix the other audios. So we're kind of just doing this one sort of last minute as I'm gonna crank this one through and we'll see how this video does too. I'm not entirely sure, but fuck it, right? All right. So what we're gonna be talking about again too would probably be another, I'll say, touch up from the last one. Also, apologize for no uploads last week as Evo was going on. I was kind of focus on that. Super hype for Marvel Token Fighting Souls, and genuinely was pleased to watch through a lot of the finals too. That's about all I got to say about that. Wish I could have gone last. I digress. I want to go with more people. But yeah, anyways, let's move on to today's topic of, let's say we're going to go through live service stuff once more. I think what we mentioned earlier too, where companies kind of just going in blind whenever they are trying to make live service games itself that obviously they weren't able to support. So I would say we should still take that with a bigger caveat answer. So overall, I still think they 100% were pushing on to their own studios to try to make games that obviously they weren't able to handle and make. For example, Concord, the game it just did not do well. It spent so much money on that too, from acquiring the studio and then realized, oh wait, the game isn't even remotely done yet. So they had to inject, I believe, another 100 millions or so, or six-digit number into the project to try to see if they can release it at some point. Which they did until they had to shut down the studio because they did not receive a lot of players from that initial going. And the projection of how this would have dealt with too, they would not be able to get their money back for so long. Also didn't help too that you had to like buy the game for this to be a live service model, albeit too they were not Overwatch, because Overwatch was also a, you buy into it and then it's a live service model. Cool, whatnot. So I do feel like there is like a way to, like, I can understand like multiple things about this. Live service models are amazing money generators for these game companies, but the problem is the fact that that's all they really see, and they don't see of why they make or why certain games like this become popular, such as, for example, Fortnite. It has so many collabs, so many things that grabs people to come into the game too. There's legitimately no other way of like kind of looking at this. Howbeit, I think it's slowly kind of dying, but not to the rate that people would say like, "Oh, it's gonna be that game." No, unfortunately, for those people thinking that, it's still gonna live, and you're not gonna see the end of it too. And it's gonna be say the same thing too of like people don't like gotcha games in general. And here's the problem. Like, I agree. I don't think the overly predatory ways of them trying to get you into spending money onto the game is great practice either too. But I'll be honest though, a lot of times it's just mostly people knowing how to regulate themselves, being able to, play the game without doing much. But that also involves making sure the game is actually still fun to play, even with or without the characters. However, you think about that, it's like, but that like kills the purpose of these gotcha system models. I mean, like, yeah, do what you want, man. I don't know what else to tell you. But yeah, let me see. I hope that, like, in general, things do get better about this, but let's keep going on about this. So, why am I getting with this? I think the live service models too, is it being pushed really hard? I honestly, I do think so, but we're starting to see like those that push super hard into it. I don't think it will do much for you, anybody else, right? And I don't know how else I can really see like that being a really big issue. Okay. Again, doesn't matter. I could say anything less than that too. What am I getting at with this? I think the problem with the live service models too, that like not only is it that they're putting studios that weren't prepared for this to make games like this, and I'll be a little bit gentle about this one too. I think a lot of these studios could handle this too, but I also think that lot of times it could be the whole thing with, players' expectations becoming ever more like increasing in terms of how much they want to have. So, okay, sorry. I feel like I might have jumped a couple steps back here too. So, I'm trying to argue for is if live service games, if they're bad due to either studios that are pushing for these things to make it into popularity, or is it the customers like appetite for games or content increasing here? So let's see what's going on with this too. I do believe quality of live service games is at some certain points they are definitely being pushed really hard, such as games like Concord, Anthem, Suicide Squad, and other titles too that I can never name at the top of my head that eventually go EOS, right? There's also a lot of gotcha anime games that also went EOS too, because not a lot of people know about it. So the whole continuous cycle for these live service models to work to is the fact that they have to like continually like make money and whatnot by trying to give value content for players. And I'll give you some things too that like I don't think that's a strong argument per se here, right? Because games like there's not enough content about it. Too. You could look at Path of Exile 2, for example. That game itself is still in early access. There hasn't been that much about it too, and we actually do see, despite like the limited content, it did drop a little bit too. But shocker for a lot of people, it's not a dead game. Why is that the case too? Because the studio that's running the live service game understands too that like there's going to be ebbs and flows. There's not really like a point to be panicking if your game go keeps going down, right? And I wouldn't know too much about that. So I think the issue that we're getting with this, and let me see, how do I word this correctly here so that I'm not tripping over my words about this? The expectations for players to see what kind of content to be finished is definitely mismatched based on the development cycle. I think players themselves are usually good at telling otherwise that you know, content will eventually come down later on too, but that naturally just translates to that like they'll probably like not play the game as much too, so that they give themselves time so that they're not like fully caught up with a lot of the content too, because there's more coming too. Might as well just kind of slow down if it's not there yet, right? But it's very weird because I think there's the mismatch of expectation where the bigger studios with like failed live service games too, they expect to always maintain like that player peak, and that's unreasonable to think of in the first place. Why do I mean it that way? Any live service games will have their ups and downs. Let's look at League of Legends, for example. Once more, I don't play League of Legends anymore too, but I don't think that like it's gonna fucking die too, because there's still some people that I know that will keep playing the game, and kudos to them. I can't really get into it that much anymore outside of playing it here and there too with ARAMs and whatnot. That doesn't really count because I'm not actually just playing the game. I'm only using it as a way to like, play with friends that want to still play the game but refuse to get off of it, right? Anyways, why do I think about this too? There is definitely a whole thing where we're seeing such a rapid release of so many games to come out. Like what me and Victor have said previously too, we are seeing the best age or best year or era of games to ever exist. So many games are being released. So many things are demanding your attention. And that's the problem with live service models, is the fact that these studios, they're trying to capture all of that audience as much as they can. But what do you do when you, not just you, another studio does that too? And now it's not just two, there's 6 studios are trying to fight for the attention of right now. The general audience themselves are kind of just not liking the products that these companies are releasing. I'll be honest too. I genuinely don't think that a lot of people are as interested in playing Concord than they would be to play Destiny. I'll say that too. My condolences to those in Bungie that have lost their job, and Sony themselves are making so many brain dead decisions too. Off topic note, why the fuck are we limiting the sales of Marvel token souls away from countries that cannot run a PlayStation network? That's still stupid and archaic. And I hate that type of shit, but at least the golden goose or golden grace of all this too is that it's available on PC. But I know not a lot of countries can afford a PC. So I'm just looking at this. I'm just like, come on, man. Why are you doing this? It makes no fucking sense for everybody on playing the games. So, anyways, coming from this, and my problem is going back to like a lot of the live service, and right now this kind of adds into the games themselves that are like so many games are being released too. A lot of the players, generally speaking, are getting burned out from like playing all this stuff too. Imagine like me playing any gotcha games too. Eventually, I can't keep playing all of these gotcha games too. I do have to drop some of them and give myself a break because oh my god, there's just so many things I need to get content, need to grind all this stuff for too. That like I just gotta start realizing like why am I playing this game if it starts to feel like a chore or a job to do this type of thing? That's not fun anymore. I think that's what a lot of these live service things do, and it's actually one of like the failures of a lot of MMO games is whenever a lot of the quest system wise too, they don't feel like quests and they're just mostly just monotonous like jobs that you just do on an everyday basis too. Holy shit! For example, one of the things that started to feel like a job would be like Lost Ark. I fucking hated the fact that I was so excited and hyped for the game when I realized while playing it, oh my god, I hate the end game content so much too. Where, what do you mean? In order for me to go to the next one, I had to upgrade my gear, and there's a chance that if I upgrade my gear, it fails. And at some point, it builds up a pity that I don't necessarily understand the number for. It apparently is a lot better now, but that honestly kind of just killed my love for Lost Ark then and there too. Just that alone. There's definitely some things to look at, such as, hey, I do think that we do have like all these increased. It is actually feeding into a lot of the customer demands to it as well, because I think right now we're seeing the most unprecedented demand for video games that I think the market has ever seen. Because some people say, oh, the gaming industry is dying and all that stuff too. Fuck you, whoever's saying that shit too, because all you do is play ball and you're a ball and shooter game. For those that don't know, it's just people that play either Call of Duty or any sports games. And that is all they play. Saying that the gaming industry is dying too, fuck no, it's more alive than it's ever been too. Hell, RPG games are making a comeback here. Holy fucking shit. That is something I haven't thought about, or things that would happen here. I digress. We're seeing so much of this stuff too that like I think we're seeing the pivot of AA studios that are trying to fill in the niche in the market by just focusing on that core audience that they want to sell their games to, and they're making a kick or success off of that. And that is about it. Now, do I think that a lot of times these AAA studios should keep making smaller scale games? Sure, should make smaller scale games. I don't think so necessarily, because the size of the game doesn't really matter for the most part too, because every one of them, you're looking at the games that you're making as if they're like financial or like they're just some type of like product that you're just only to sell, when in reality you're not looking at this as a product of craft. Because what are video games in like these gaming studios? They're art pieces, they're like art based projects too, albeit too I'm not really a fan of like certain games that are very artistic in some aspects too. Actually no, I take that back. It's not that I'm a big fan of it. There are some games that do express that artistic nature of it, and they do it well and excellently when it comes to balancing the artistic style and the gameplay function of it. There's nothing I have any issues with that. For example, Ori and the Blind Forest, beautifully made game, and it has all of the notes that some people say, oh, it looks like some artsy fartsy like indie game too. No, there's layers and levels to this stuff too, where the story matters to this. And that's what I'm a sucker for. I'm a sucker for good stories for video games. For example, you got the Tales in the Sky remaster stuff too, albeit yeah, it's a remaster, but it's a proper one too, where not only did we update the graphics too, they updated the gameplay, they updated a lot of things about it too. Maybe there were some story changes, probably not that much too to begin with, but nonetheless, I am okay with that. I am actually a big fan of something like this, albeit I can't wait for part two to come out, but it is what it is. I'll just keep playing the old original titles for that. I still need to catch up on that shit. Yeesh. Now, do I think right now that we have do we have an issue of too many games being released here? I think we kind of do, just a little bit. Because the problem that we see here is that there's the attention economy that's going on too, such as the fact that every game needs to grab your attention. Like, think, for example, the newest term or trend that people call it now, every friend slot game that you come by. Even though I don't think friend slot is a proper wording for that too, because a lot of times you don't call a friend slot. You know what you call? You call them party games. But then party games does not sound like a modern term whenever it's just a friend slot, because I think the way how it is dude, is the fact that they use slot because there's just so many of these games that are of this genre are coming out too, so therefore slot. Now, is it a bad thing? Probably not too, but probably if you aren't aware for the term, it just sounds like it's a bad thing. But a lot of time it's just meant as a replacement word for party games and whatnot. That's all it really is. And you have a bunch of those going around too. Much more players are actually getting their needs met from everywhere else. That, let's be honest, the AAA studios, they're so far behind on trying to meet those demands because all their businesses decisions of prioritizing other things instead of improving the quality of the IPs they currently have. Now, I don't think in general too that the AAA studios should not make new games. I think they should still attempt to try to make new games because guess what, too? The problem is the fact that you have all this resources, but you're so afraid to use them willingly to try to make something new or do something with it that you just end up creating all this bureaucratic slowdowns, waste, and for what too? You just end up killing so many studios, and there's even right now talks of arcane studios that are just about to be shut down. And they were supposed to be the one that make the new Marvel Blade game. Who knows if that's actually going to be going through that now? But right now, this current state of the games of a lot of these AAA studios is very much awful, and I can't tell you if there's a light at the end of this tunnel too, but I think we're seeing a lot of the bigger studios that are just tying down on what they currently have. Unfortunately, Halo Game Studios, it's not a bad thing too. I think when they first showed off the trailers of only be on fucking rings here to show off oh, we did all this stuff to update a lot of stuff, yeah, this is whatever, we've seen this multiple times already, why are we playing this? And then the next one they showed us, oh, there's some new story missions that you could play before the events of Halo Combat Evolved. I'm like, oh, why didn't you show us this first? Because I don't know. It was just the whole thing straight up. I think they were trying to be safe with it by showing stuff that they were familiar with, because let's be honest, Halo titles are in the fucking gutter. There's nothing new, there's nothing imaginative about it, and we're just kind of just going off of nostalgia at this point, right? I hate that it's what it's come down to for a lot of these, but these studios, they need to have assurance to actually make a kill, right? And we're going through a lot of this stuff too. And let me go through some of the nuances of what I think it could be contributing to why I think there's such weird divisive divide to which one do I lean more towards. Do I think the consumer demand is actually outpacing the development studios, or do I think it's still the development studios? At the end of the day, it's still the development studios, because the customers ever growing hunger for more games, that's just natural part of the market too. And for a lot of companies, if they can't meet that demand, then well, you just got to deal with it. And you can't really control such things like that from one big company. You may be as big as you want, but it won't ever stop. Drinking water real quick. I think there's many various things that come about this too, such as what I think actually kind of forced this terrible and worse situation that they're in right now. I think the whole thing when they were laying off people for AI stuff too, like I said, that was probably the big AAA studios' excuse of a reason to just lay off people, in the fact that they were going to use AI to replace them. Unfortunately for them too, the AI doesn't exactly do what they want it to do. Shocker be everybody, right? Holy shit. And now they're trying to hire back people they just fired, but a lot of them are either no longer in the pool now, or they're already gone to other places where they get treated better too. Because if this is how you're going to treat like your employees to begin with too, why would they come back to work with you again? And a lot of times too, the gaming studios, at least here in the West, they have a terrible culture of like crunching. I don't see why anybody would want to do that too. Albeit some people say crunching is part of game development studio too. True, but I also want to push this to other to like new developers as well. Of like, if you want to like really dedicate yourself to working on this game too, please take care of your own health. As much as like you miss some things and whatnot too, it which should not be as important as your own health, right? I'm just saying that as a most part. A lot of gamers would be like, "Oh, I don't give a shit about these developers. They never give a shit about me." Well, guess what? Too. Unfortunately, a lot of times the players are definitely wrong on that part. I think we need to be able to mutually understand one another about this too. We understand that we want you to make games, but please don't die while doing that. That's all we care. And for the studios to develop this, you can't expect all the gamers to be sympathetic to your plight and whatnot too. People get sick. It's whatever. Just learn how to manage it yourself. Don't overwork it while you're sick too, because otherwise, too, if you get even more sick while trying to still work at it, it's going to be an issue and you're going to have the same problems again. So just rest well. It does not need to be that serious about that. Unless it is like probably your way of making money, right? But let's be honest, too, anything that like gets released to game wise, too, you have like a gamble of whether or not this succeeds or not. That's always like the realistic risk about this. So I think there's definitely a lot of times there's that cultural mismatch of like culture between uh, players to developers, but a lot of that legitimately gets fixed if you have proper QA teams, which XD. For those that don't know, QA just is a shorthand name for quality assurance team. To make sure that the games themselves, quality wise, is ready for customers. And a lot of times, the QA works with the players too to get feedback from them, and then kind of addresses it to the team. Unfortunately, the studios had just straight up removed them before the AI collapse too, because they viewed the QA team as the biggest slowdown to development cycles, which is like, okay, sure. A lot of games are taking forever too. And for the gamers too, yes, you're right to be mad that like some games are taking pretty much forever. But a lot of times we understand too that like we're even more mad of how come the games are taking so long too, and that by the time it comes out, it's just as trash and it's fucking awful. What is happening? That's what happens when you remove QA testing. Now, at that point, I don't even believe that QA testing was like the main bottleneck of what slowed them down in the first place. Based on from other anecdotes of some developers that are kind of commenting about like how like some of the studios were being ran to, holy shit, some people are just doing the same work over and over, and then they just have meetings about like which work they're going to be submitting first, and then after that it's just now that person needs to find approval from the next person that may not have been available because he's in another fucking country. Holy shit, it's so fucking insane of like how these big AAA studios honestly function. And like I said, they're too big to move. Look what happened to Ubisoft. At this point, they have seen the most damage to their reputation compared to every other company or studio that exists here. And it's something. I do believe that like, we can probably maybe salvage Ubisoft. It'd be funny enough. We just bought out Ubisoft so that way we could just make all the Tom Clancy games that I want. Hell, I want them to bring back the proper Ghost Recon, and I would, in this case, reimagine Breakpoint to be what it was supposed to be envisioned. A tactical spec ops games that has survival based mechanics too, where you had to look for ammo of your own. And it's like, does that sound like a semi extraction shooter? I think that's what Breakpoint was kind of supposed to lean towards, but they didn't really know how to deal with it that much too. I hated the RPG system that they went with too, based on like other games. God, I hate the way that is like the Ubisoft with identity of making games. God, that will forever be something that like I absolutely detest in a lot of things with Ubisoft games nowadays. When it comes to Assassin's Creed, to any Tom Clancy titles, and the only thing that works with them would just be like their Rainbow Six Siege, and that's like its own live service monster that they've been kind of fucking the pooch on that one too. I don't know. There's so much of you got that, and the creative misalignment of what I said too, that like these companies, they're not really caring if like the games they make too are good quality products. They just need to know they can extract the most amount of money. And guess what too? Players are voicing their concerns, or not concerns, their annoyance too. They're being milked this much, and they show that dissatisfaction by assessing, we'll just stop playing your games. And what happens then too when you have so many of them just kind of stop playing your games? And a lot of it is like in the gotcha games, similarly, how are they still the whales? They know too that like this is like a harsh reality for gotcha games too. Even though we want to see the games better too, depending on the studios too, they might only listen to the complaints that whales would give, only because the whales are the one that are giving them money. So in a lot of obviousness too, especially if it's a customer base too, you will want to listen to customer that pays. That's just reality of all of this. So I think we do see an issue about that. And like I said, that's why I say gotcha models are very much problematic. But let's take that to the side here too, because that'd be its own separate topic. I'm just commenting on, in this case, the way how the Western style development games that are pushing for live service, it's not working out for them too. And the only few live service games that actually like survives would be games like Fortnite, League of Legends, World of Warcraft. Hell, even like older stuff like OSR or old school RuneScape. You have games like that too that are just straight up like forever games for them too. But all these developers, they want to have the forever game. But you can't do that because let's be honest too, those players that are on those games, they probably wouldn't be playing your game to begin with too. This actually goes to my previous point when I mentioned it with Riot too, when they were disappointed at 2xKO or Double Knockout. I'm not, you know what? I'll just say that, yeah, Double Knockout. It did not get the player base numbers that they were hoping to have. Even though 2xKO, whenever I watched that on Evo, it was actually really fucking cool and dope. And they're just disappointed that they didn't reach player numbers. I'm like, what numbers were you trying to achieve? Were you trying to beat Street Fighter 6? Because I'll tell you this too, people that play Street Fighter 6, they probably won't ever want to try to touch 2xKO because let's be honest, not everybody likes tag team based fighting games. And this is where the problem of like they're trying to like cast the most largest net possible to try to get the most amount of fish. And you run into the issue of like you can do that, you can get that many fish too, but you start trying to pull that shit in and you start to realize, oh shit, I don't think I have a boat for this. I don't have enough manpower to try to handle a lot of this stuff too. Because making these live service games too, it is very hard to the first place too. And I'm not saying or expecting to that like they need like a massive studio, because clearly even with a massive studio, they're kind of just falling apart anyways. I think what it is that like they need to have a clear vision of like what this means or what live service realistically means for them too. Because a lot of these studios, they're not trying to make a live service game. They're just trying to get the most amount of money they can before the game dies effectively. It's like in some ways too, that like they don't want the games to, or they keep pushing for games to go higher up in prices because obviously too, they're trying to come up with the fact that like, oh, we're not making as much and we're burning so much money too, so we're just gonna have to increase the cost of games overall too to cover up the cost. And then next thing you do, you're kind of just forcing players to just not buy games and still stick with the games that they're still playing, causing even more problems for you. A lot of this is insane. A lot of it is definitely a self-serving problem that probably didn't need to have. All in all too, I think the hot take would be like, I think companies are still at fault in the way that we are, or they are trying to push for more live service games too. But I do think some fault lies within us in a small margin, in the fact that the only reason live service model works is because we have people that have given them money to show them that it does work. A lot of times people do not know how to spend money correctly to kind of voice like certain type of metrics. Like, oh, why do we have this stuff too? When it's like, or why are all these games so predatory and whatnot too? It's like, Gerald, I'm looking at your bank statement. You have spent $500 on the fucking Wooo. I don't want to hear you complaining about the fact that you are falling victim to the same predatory stuff too that I also have spent money on Wuthering Waves too. But here's the difference between you and I. I like the game too. I like the way how Wuthering Waves is. I want to support this game. just because I don't want Kuro Games to like give me preferential treatment. I want to see them keep living. I want to see what they can do. That is why I spend money on them. I'm not trying to say this that's either too. That's also fucking coping otherwise too. Because eventually Wuthering Waves will die. I just want to see how far it will go. That is it. I do hope too that like some gamers can probably grow a brain cell here and there to try to like, oh, maybe we should actually try to do better and actually not spend money needlessly. Then again, we live in a fucking attention-based market too. Everyone is gonna do whatever they can. But at least right now, too, people that are spending money more on games than ever before too, they're spending it on like smaller studios, such as the Friends slot makers. Good for everybody, right? Anyways, thank you for listening to my rant about this stuff too, to kind of cover up the fact that I fucked up on the recording. So yeah, thank you for tuning in tonight. Love you all. Bye, and happy 4th of July.